Was there anything that your employers or your colleagues did that was actually really helpful when you went back to work?
So I think the main point to make there is the journey I've been on is a journey. So, you know, it's getting your primary diagnosis, being off with your diagnosis, returning to work, getting your secondary diagnosis, and then where I find myself now. And at each stage, I find there's some things that are consistent, but some things that are just practically and emotionally really helpful. So if I think about a tiny example, sticks in my head about when I was going back to work after primary diagnosis. I had very little hair, I'd lost all confidence, somebody else was doing my job because they were covering it. You know, my pass had been, you know, just, what's the word, not taken off me, but disenabled because I've been off for such a long time. Yeah, and my colleagues did little things like came to meet me at the door and walked me through the floor. And by the time I got to where my desk was, I'd said hello to so many people, and so many people had said, it's just so lovely to see you back, that I felt my confidence starting to come back. Little things like they would come out with my favourite scone from the canteen. I'm talking like little things that just made you feel you weren't forgotten about, you were connected. And I think that's my key point, is keeping somebody feeling that they're out of sight is not out of mind. They didn't choose it. Now that's emotional connection with your colleagues, but it can also be work connection. And I had a chief exec who I worked very closely with at that time. And he sent me, as he knew I was starting to come out the other end and I was just trying to get my stamina back, sent me 2 or 3 questions and said, we'd love to have a coffee at the right time with you. Here's the 3 things I've been mulling over. Give these some thought. So there were 3 questions that I could think about if I had half an hour that I felt like I had some energy. And it was connection with the work. And he was sending me a very clear message that you do this job. This is your work. I value what you will bring to this. And then the emotional side of just keeping that social connection as well.
It's so important, isn't it? I mean, I guess in a hospital, you realise if you don't socialise with your colleagues out of work, they may forget about you when you're not there because they wouldn't normally contact you. And it can be really hard walking into that environment after years and months have passed, feeling like a fraud and a stranger.
That's right. And I think the other aspect to that is there are very few people going through the same experience as you. So at work, you're all doing different jobs and you've got different challenges, but you're in an environment that's similar. You're working with, you know, the same colleagues. You're trying to really pull towards common goals.
I guess it can be quite hard. I know I found when I was off having treatment, because I didn't socialise with my colleagues, they didn't stay in touch because I wasn't a friend. And it was quite hard going back into that environment, feeling like a fraud. Would they remember? Did they know what had happened to me? How is it for you?
The whole journey can be incredibly lonely, to be honest. And I think I find myself falling between 2 sort of groups. One is the group at work where you share a common vision, you share colleagues, you're trying to pull together towards, you know, common outcomes. And then suddenly you're not part of that. And then the other group is I'm part of a couple of communities where I do have the opportunity to say, this is how I'm feeling today, either emotionally or physically. Does anybody get etc. But they don't know the other part of my identity, which is, you know, and I get quite a lot from even my own friends, which is about, why do you insist on keeping working? And I'm saying, because I am. So I think it can be incredibly lonely, and you can feel like you don't necessarily have that shared purpose with anybody. And I think therefore that connection becomes even more important. And just the other thing I would say is for the colleagues that I would say I'm friends with as well. If it's that, you know, I've always carried maternal guilt. If I'm at work, I'm not at home, and if I'm at home, I'm not at work. I think there's an element of that has come into it for me, which is we can't lose sight of working with cancer on the colleagues around the individual, because we're so incredibly stretched. I care for these colleagues as friends, They care for me as a friend as much as a colleague. And so I can often feel a sense of, you know, I'm not there, they're a pair of hands lighter, you know, how can I support them in the background, but not
guilt,
because then I might have to let them down at short notice and all of that. So I think there's something very much in that message about caring for colleagues as much as there is for the person that's at the centre of this.
Because it must be really hard if they don't know anyone who's had incurable cancer to work with you on a daily basis. And I guess now, because you have your hair, you're not bald like you were in chemo, it's very easy to forget. And how they don't know what to say or how to treat you, or should they mention it. And it's getting those almost ground rules at the beginning to say, isn't it? When I'm at work, but if I need a wobble, you've got one person you can go to.
Yeah, and it's back to what I was referring to about you as me, the individual, being crisp about my messaging around this, how I want to be treated with it, because the relationship between work and cancer is really complex and it's really individual. So from financial perspectives, your connection to work, you know, how you related to your work before, the work that you actually do, is it physical work? Is it, I'm fortunate that I can sit at a desk and still do work, and how you want your life to be. So I am an incredibly private person. I do not talk about this. This is my second foray into talking about all of this. I find it incredibly uncomfortable because my life is private. And I've made a very conscious decision that I wanted my children's upbringing and our home life to be not all about cancer. I wanted it to be about a fun family life. And so it's getting those crisp messages and finding your allies. And for me, it was only, you know, less than 10 people that I said, here's how I want to be treated, and here's what I need to ask you for help with in doing this. And my colleagues have just been absolutely terrific. You know, they really have, in all sorts of ways, and you know, you can't thank them enough. And you know, you would do it back the way, but
you would.
People don't have to go the extra mile.
No.
But the thing about awkwardness, I'll just touch on very quickly, because it's a huge thing in and outside work. Cancer scares people.
Yes.
You hear 1 and 2, and it's not just cancer. I do want to reiterate, I am only speaking from one lens, but cancer scares people. And what you tend to find is a lot of people are uncomfortable, they're awkward, they don't know what to say. So you get into the situation where they tell you cancer stories, mainly of people that are dying. You know, they tell you, they use words that are intended to inspire you, like, you're so inspirational, you'll fight this, you'll beat this, you'll come out the other side. And a lot of it comes from, in my situation, just a lack of understanding. There are 35,000 people in the UK living with incurable breast cancer. 1,000 die every month. And yet we're looking at COVID stats that are comparable in a lot of, but people do not know what it means, and therefore you can't expect them to know. So I think there's something just about, if you have that upfront conversation and you say, look, we're going to have loads of awkward conversations, I'm always going to take what you ask me with positive intent, you know, because I get it wrong sometimes when I talk about sexuality or a particular religion, and I don't
No. And I think it's realizing they don't mean harm, they just want to help. And in the beginning you can get really cross. Actually, I now think it's just lovely they're talking to me, and I don't take it personally, and it's just nice that they are still staying in touch. I guess for me, it's looking at you. No one would know that you had incurable breast cancer. We tend to imagine, well, I guess I did before I had it, it's a picture of someone in a hospice who has weeks to live, and you see they don't look healthy, and that's what the public imagine incurable cancer is. But you could live for years like this, and it's just changing that perception.